Hi guys, welcome to Binary Bang TV. Today we'll be taking a look at the point of controversy that happened yesterday between Real Madrid and Ajax during the Champions League football match. Now, if you're a football fan or a soccer fan, you probably heard about it, watched it, and you're already aware of this controversy. Now, we're not going to talk about football tactics or anything like that. What we're going to pay more attention to is whether the ball actually did cross the line or not. And in order to do this, we're going to make use of two images that were made available on the internet, and one shows the furthest possible point at which the ball possibly got to before it was kicked, changing its direction, and the other is an experiment which shows that from certain angles, a ball might appear to have fully crossed the line, even though it hasn't. So by using these two images and applying some understanding of spatial orientation, we hope that we'll be able to get to a more concise answer. One of the difficulties about this has to do with the fact that humans did not really evolve to make use of such accurate linear perspective. In fact, it was somewhere in 1400s that the Italian Renaissance architect Filippo Brunelleschi, I hope I didn't butcher his name, actually documented a process by which linear perspective can be more correctly observed. And so for thousands of years, people represented perspective inaccurately. So it's not very easy, and I feel that the tools which the people working in the VAR room are using need to be updated so that such difficult situations can be easily diffused. But do you know what's not difficult? Is fashion. That's right, this video is proudly sponsored by the good guys at Fragged, a small fashion brand with activewear, streetwear. You can go check them out to find out. In fact, the owner of the brand, a very talented designer, approached me and gave me some pointers which I can use in presenting this video. Since this channel is supposed to be more of a podcast, we are not very good at visual representations, and he was so helpful. He has really good spatial orientation, and yeah, so you can go check him out to find out more. So now coming back to our main topic, combining all that we know, we can proceed to analyze this image better. One last thing I'd like to mention before we actually proceed is the limitation caused by image resolution. And what we see here is a still image which likely shows the furthest point at which the ball got to before it changed direction. One thing we do know is the direction in which the ball was traveling before it changed directions. But what we do not know is if this is actually the furthest point. Now, removing motion blur, we can indicate that the furthest point according to this image is right here, indicated by the black line. But it is entirely possible that the ball actually did travel further beyond this black line, but was unable to be captured due to the limitation of frame rate and image resolution. So we need to keep that in mind, that we are working with the timeline which might actually be inaccurate, and so the ball could have even moved further out. But even with what we have, the result is interesting. The process I used was to scale the image and rotate it so that both images have a very similar point of reference. Although they have a slightly different camera angle at which the camera is facing, at which the camera meets the surface, they are relatively close enough for experimental purposes, and so we'll have to make do with this. Probably experts with better equipment can get a better result. After the rotation and the adjustments, the images were overlapped to see exactly how far the ball actually did travel. Now, as we can see, when the overlap is done, the ball from the image from the experiment shows that the distance from the ball to the line in the experimental image is actually shorter than the distance from the ball to the line in the VAR image, and so we can clearly conclude that the ball has actually traveled further than is shown in the experimental image. Therefore, it becomes highly likely that all of the ball did cross all of the line. Again, there are some approximations that we had to do, and there are some limits to the footage that we have available. A similar incident came up some time ago with the match against Chelsea and Tottenham Hotspurs. Now, what we see is another false ruling by VAR due to their limits of understanding spatial orientation. In this clip, or in this picture, what we are shown is that the player Kane seems to be onside, but what they did wrongly was to simply use the last point at which the defender is standing, and then use the feet of Kane. They did not take into account the fact that the player is slightly leaning forward. So when we apply what we know about angles, spatial orientation, the correct image that they should have used looks more like this. The red line has been added in order to better indicate that almost half of the player is actually offside. So even without having an alternative camera angle, using only this one, we can clearly see that the player is offside. So hopefully in the future, better tools can be given to people who work in this department so that they can make better decisions and keep the game fair. Thank you. Next time we'll be looking at a topic that I have been meaning to get to for some time now, and it has to do with AlphaStar. Now, AlphaStar is an AI developed by Google DeepMind in order to test the limits of StarCraft, I guess you could say that. Recently, they released AlphaStar, which went against some really good players, and the results was interesting. So we'll be taking a look at the implications of what this means for gaming and humanity in general. Sorry to sound dramatic, but hopefully it's going to be very interesting. You wouldn't like to miss it. If you enjoyed this video, want to watch future videos, want to support the channel, there's a link to our Patreon, all of that. And as always, thanks for watching.